In the Bible, in the book of 2 Kings, in Jerusalem, it talks about the Tophet. The Tophet is called the place of fire. When archaeologists began to discover the Canaanite sites around the Mediterranean, which there are many, they used the biblical term because in the Bible, the Tophet is where they sacrificed their children unto the god Baal, also known as Molech. It just depends on which nation that you're talking about. His name changed from Assyrian to Canaanite, but it was the same god. But the Canaanites were the ones that took the worship of Baal to the extreme. And so it's on the Southeast Valley, and it's in the Valley of Hinnom. And remember, if I spoke on the Ketif Hinnom scrolls, those little scrolls were also found in a tomb in this valley. God tells Abraham that the land that he is giving him to his descendants, that it wouldn't be theirs until the fourth generation because the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full or complete. And that statement shows that God is patient. It takes evidently a lot to provoke God to wrath. But God knows that the Amorites, you see a lot of these names, the Hivites, the Perizzites, and the Amorites, these are descendants of Canaan. And so that's why they're called collectively the Canaanites. God knows when we sin. And Sodom and Gomorrah's multitude of sins, it was grievous to God, but God knew the severity of their sins. God makes an example of Sodom and Gomorrah to be remembered through the test of time. And even today, if you look up the term sodomite, it has to do with sexual perversion. And that's where they had gotten to. That's where this nation is headed, and the world probably for that matter. And so we see that these things are grievous. The particular sin of the Canaanites, though, really has to do with their idolatry and the extreme that they are sacrificing innocent children to appease what they think is a god, which is actually not a god. When the Israelites come out of Egypt and they're commanded not to let their children pass through the fire, I had actually heard it preached from pulpits and from Bible classes that this was not actual child sacrifice, that this was maybe like the hoop that you see in a circus, and they would pass the children through the fire. They couldn't fathom that people actually would do such things, and they would try to ease your minds that it wasn't as bad as it seemed. But when you see the results, when you see the digs of what they left behind, it'll make your skin crawl. I took a course from La Pienza University in Rome, Sapienza, and the archaeologist was working in an area off the coast of Sicily. There's a little island that is protected by a little barrier of land, and then there's Sicily, and it's called Moyta. They pronounce it Moitza, but it looks like it's spelled Moita, so either pronunciation probably is acceptable. And it's a small little island, and that's the way many of the Canaanite settlements were. And they find that in these settlements, the same type of worship. And Molech is the sounding of the name Baal to the Assyrians. But at this time, it was obviously recognizable to that. So in Deuteronomy, again, no one is to pass his son or daughter through the fire, or use divination, observer of times, enchanter, or witch. And so much of the worship after the flood, you see, turns to, the constellations that we have today, Aries and the ones that associate with the different months. These were established way back in 2000 BC or beyond, even further. We have the Sumerian star chart that's over there on the flood table. It's a round disc and it's clay. And these constellations are already on there. And we've known them by different names through the ages, but they're still the same shapes of the twins. And for Gemini, and you have the various ones. August is Taurus, the bull, or Leo, the lion. So Canaanites, we read about in the Old Testament, but you don't read about Canaanites in the New Testament. And so why is that? Well, the Greeks called Canaanites Phoenicians. And we see that Paul and Barnabas came back through Phoenicia. And that's the area where Tyre and Sidon are. And as you look here, I think maybe I got the same name. So you've got Tyre on the coast, and Tyre was actually an island that was out, and it was so well fortified, and they had such boats or ships. But they didn't really use their navy to conquer territory. Canaanites are the merchants of the ancient world. And so Canaanites went all across the Middle East and all across the Mediterranean. And the trees of Lebanon, that was theirs. That was their control. We see that when David is king, the king of Tyre and David have a relationship. And then when Solomon becomes king, Tyre, the king of Tyre sends cedars down for the temple so it can be built. And so there's some relationship in that. When the temple is rebuilt in Ezra's day, the king of the Medes, which Cyrus the Great, the king of the Persians, had ordered that the materials for the temple be purchased by the Medes and the Persians to rebuild that temple. Sidon is on the coastline, and Tyre is an island that is out. There's a statement that is made by Jesus that it will be more tolerable for Tyre in those days and Sidon. And I was thinking about that, and a few hundred years, 300 years before Christ, you have the Greeks that came through. And Alexander the Great does something to Tyre that had never been done before. They thought they were impenetrable. And Alexander asked to go out and worship at the temple of Hercules, because he thought he was a descendant of Hercules. And he asked to go out to Tyre, and they said, no, there's a temple there at Sidon on the coast. You just worship over there. And it really made me mad. And so he built an isthmus out to Tyre, and they knocked down a section of the wall and went in, and they did terrible things to the people of Tyre. And he was not merciful to Tyre. And Tyre was no longer an island after that. You look at it today, it's an isthmus that goes out there, and it's from Alexander. What he did to Tyre was so bad that when he got down to Egypt, the Egyptians had heard about it, and they just flung open the doors of Egypt and said, hey, how are you? It's all yours. Because they didn't want to suffer the same consequences. So Carthage is an ancient Canaanite settlement. Carthage is and these are city-states. Each one had a king, but they had the same customs. They did some of the same things, and pretty much. Tarsus, where Job was going to, is known to be a Canaanite settlement. They have not found where it's at. Some think it's probably near the area of Rock of Gibraltar or somewhere on the Spanish or Portuguese coast. But it is known in ancient history it was a place. It would be like saying I'm going to Timbuktu. It was the furthest place known. And it was a Canaanite settlement. They were the best sailors of the ancient world. Moita, and that's what I was talking about. They're off the coast of Sicily. And the things that are found at Moita are also found, and there are other Canaanite settlements over here. Byblos, then that sound like Bible? Well, that's what the Greeks named it, because that's where they got a lot of their papyrus from in trading. Byblos and the city, which is now known as Beirut, and these cities here. So the Assyrian king, and I'm not sure which one, but in his palace, was so impressed at the efficiency of the Canaanites delivering the cedars of Lebanon, and they could do it by water, by land, and when they delivered the cedars for him, and they would take them down to Egypt, they took them all across the Mediterranean. And he was so impressed that he built it, or made this relief on his palace walls of them delivering the timbers. Now, today, Lebanon, the trees have mainly been cut down over the centuries, and the nation of Lebanon is trying to regrow forest up in the mountains there where those have been. I already mentioned Jonah fleeing to Tarsus, and so that in the ancient writings they have discovered was a Canaanite settlement. So this is Sicily. Oh, what is that show? There we go. So there you can see the island. It's a very small island there, and we're going to zoom in on that. And this is what it looks like from the air. And if you look here, there is a little circular area down here, and then there's a little square thing. And then up in here on the north side, there are some other dwellings. And so we're going to talk about both of these places here on this island. And even though it's in Sicily, they find the same thing at Carthage, they find the same thing at Byblos. I'm giving you this because this is where the course that I took dealt with most of the archaeology. The circular part, my daughter Erin made this for me, so this little, and it comes up pretty good. So, oops. I'm going backwards. I'm going backwards. I must have fat fingers. So this circular wall, there was one entrance in. When they first found this, they thought that this was an ancient harbor. And then they found out that it's only like this deep. And then they began excavating more. And what they began finding around this wall is they found a human tooth. They didn't know why, but they found one. And then they went and they were digging around the wall, and then they find another human tooth. And then they found that at the exact distance, all the way around the wall, they find adult human teeth, but then they also find the pelvis of a 9-year-old girl there. And they don't know about the human teeth, that they were part of sacrifice, or people pulled their tooth in honor of Baal. At this point, they don't know, but it's very peculiar. We do know from the site at Gezer, they did sacrifice children, girls up to 9 years old. And those girls there were sawn in half. So they found that pelvis. There is a shrine here of, let me go backwards. I keep hitting the wrong button. So you have one for Ashtoreth and then one for Baal, and this one was actually a temple. And then there would have been shops all the way around this that provided the sacrifice and all of the things that you could buy to make your sacrifices there. And then they couldn't determine what this thing actually was. They called it a sacred pool. And there is a base there, and they found that the feet of a statue of Baal was there, and he's about 6-7 foot tall. They found the torso of the Baal, and here in Moitza, he's usually got his arm over his chest, and then an arm up. Now, typically, when you see it, he has a mallet in his hand to strike the clouds and a lightning bolt. But here at this site, a lot, you see that he has the arm across the chest. Archaeology has been working more with the astronomy department of the colleges and the sites. And what they found is sites like the Hittite sites. There were carved in the side of the mountains all of these gods, and they were curious as to what and why all of that was there. And when they got the astronomers involved, they knew right away that the sun would rise and set over the year upon those individual gods, and they lined up with the solstice or the astrological chart. And the Canaanites did something similar. So when they got the astronomers involved here, they said, oh, it's a reflective pond. And so basically it's a telescope, a primitive telescope. And by that, the night heavens would reflect on this pond, and the priests and the people involved in this worship would measure the stars and calculate. And remember, these are sailors, and how did sailors operate in the ancient world? How did they navigate? They had to use stars. And so they become more and more in tune to the stars at night and develop, it seems, different forms of worship. And even though the Canaanites are using them, it seems like it was developed as far back to the Sumerian post-flood era. So this is the torso that they found in another part of the island. And so it stood on a pedestal like this. And then there are these stone carvings of Baal. You see, on this particular island, he has his arm crossed over his chest. And no one really knows why, but that's different than some of the other Canaanite sites, because usually he's got that mallet. This is the stele. I've got one over there in the museum, and this is about 16 feet tall. It's at the Louvre in Paris, the museum there. There's the mallet, the lightning bolt, and if you remember, if you've been through the museum with me, Baal to the Greeks is Zeus. Zeus has lightning bolts. Molech, Marduk to the Babylonians, Jupiter to the Romans, and then it continues onward, and then by the time you get to the Norse, he is Thor. And so he went to work for Marduk. And, you know, we just don't get rid of this stuff. It's there. And his consort is Ashtoreth in the Old Testament when you're talking with the Canaanites, but she is also called the Queen of the Heavens. Well, you kind of lost me there, but I'll...
She's the one where Easter comes from?
Yes. Yeah. So you have Ashtoreth, and she's known as the Queen of the Heavens. Ishtar. She's a goddess of fertility throughout the ancient world. The Greeks see her also as a warrior goddess. She is the goddess Artemis or Diana at Ephesus. And at Ephesus, she's a fertility goddess. By the way, at Ephesus, if you recall, the city magistrate, when he's addressing the crowd, and he talks about when her star came down from heaven. The reason the temple of Ephesus was so far outside the city, it's believed that they tried to build the temple on top of the meteorite that landed there outside the city, and that they said it was Artemis, and so they built the temple on top of that. So anyway. So this is a small Baal. The Canaanite version, he usually has the conical hat like that. In many instances, you see that he has sort of these little stilts. I guess that's to help him get up to the clouds to strike him. And this one, the lightning bolt has been broken off. There's another version. And so when you see these, now I was telling some people the internet, if you go out there, they have illustrations of Baal with a bull head and horns. That, I have never seen one. That is not accurate. Somebody on their own, and a gospel preacher wrote a bulletin article about Baal and did a wonderful job, except he went out and looked on the internet and described what Baal looked like. And it's not. This is Baal. And we've got to be careful where we get our information from when we are teaching. And I think you have to do a lot of hard research, because there's a lot of misinformation out there. Baal, he's also has some relationship to Poseidon. The professor that taught my course, his name is Negro. That's his last name, Lorenzo Negro. And he is Italian. And he was trying to explain how Poseidon is sort of like a Noah character as well. And that in a lot of these ancient idolatries, gods sort of cross over and they get blurred. So we still don't know a lot of exactly how these things were worshipped across cultures. So if somebody's telling you anything definite about these things, nothing's really definitive about a lot of this stuff other than the hard artifacts that have been discovered. Zeus to the Greeks, we already mentioned. Jupiter to the Romans, Thor. And then his counterpart is Ashtoreth. Now, this is an illustration that I found on the internet, and this is not a good representation of Ashtoreth, but you remember Gideon, and he went and he cut down the groves. In the ancient world, and whenever we see ancient temples, we just see the remnants of those temples. When I took a course through the University of Athens on olives, olives were seen as a gift of the gods. And there were some olive trees on the Acropolis there in Athens. And it was believed that Athena planted one of those trees, and they had penalties that if you took any branches off that tree, or if you damaged the tree, the penalty could even be severe as death. In the ancient world, they're finding that olive trees were planted around many of these ancient temples from Persia all the way over to Greece and down south. And groves were often associated with this worship. In the Bible, we just read about the groves, and these became sacred places. And the reason I'm telling you this, I want to show you something as we go along here, and so we kind of file that away. But there's always these groves, and I think within these groves they must have had some images of the things that they worship, but they were considered sacred to the idols that they worship. So Astarte, Ashtoreth, Ishtar, and then the Bible does say Ashtoreth, and then Artemis, and then Iana from the Sumerians, and then goes in the Latin to Diana. She became the DC comic strip character Wonder Woman, the man that wrote the story about Wonder Woman for DC Comics, used this mythology. So you've got Thor and you've got Wonder Woman that are still working away at this, and they're called heroes. I believe that there are no heroes. Herod's name, the title Herod, means hero. You put the finger over the D there. It means hero or heroic. And the only hero we see is Christ. And he didn't come with he controlled history. And he came to save. And you see the contrast and the benevolence that Jesus had. But now all men are told to repent. Easter, the word Easter, all of these words mean star, as well as Easter. Things associated with Ashtoreth, anything that symbolize fertility, eggs, bunnies, lilies, and things that are associated with Easter today. So moving upwards to this upper part up here, there is a sacred place, and usually when dead bodies are involved in the ancient world, they're always built outside the city walls. So what we're looking at here is actually inside the city walls, and this is the area of the Tophet. If you look up Carthage and you type in ancient Carthage site, and just type in urn or something like that, you are going to see the model, exact model like this that you will see here. You will see it in Byblos, and it seems like the ones at Tyre have been destroyed or built over, and then I'm not sure about Sidon. So what you have here is a wall around this area, and then you've got the shrine to Baal, and then you have, this is the path that you would go, and in this area is what is called the Field of Urns. And then this area is called votive deposits. But the way you would go is this way, and actually there are two sacred wells that were here, and they are rectangular shaped. One well either dried out or was filled in, but both have been filled in today. And whoever destroyed this site wanted to destroy this worship, and they filled in the wells as well. I didn't mean to say that, but anyway. So then you take a step up to this platform, and this, they believe, is the place of burning. What they're looking for here still, and maybe it got buried somewhere, but they're looking for an oven. And that kind of makes your skin crawl, because when we talk about the Field of Urns, you're going to see why it had to be an oven. It had to be a very hot fire. Then there are steps up to the shrine of Baal, and then his image was right here. And we're going to see some stone carvings of what this looked like and on this podium. And so they would make they would wash the sacrifice or something there. They would come here and make the sacrifice, and then they would go up into this area, and then they would make deposits of the votives and then the urns. So precinct walls, you got sacred well, and I've already gone over this, so we'll just jump on ahead. So here is a model that's in my video of the Field of Urns and these things that I just talked about, and so then this is the place of burning. So this is what it actually looks like, what they found. Now you see the urns. The urns are placed in that sandy soil, and the soil is a different texture in this area. And the same thing is at Carthage and biblos. These are arranged, but they haven't figured out what the rhyme or reason of the order is. They'll have a cluster, then they'll have some space, and they're not the same, but they can tell that there had to be some reason they put it in the ground this way. And what they find in these urns are very fine ash. And this is looking at one of the urns using the forensic science methods that they have and looking at the radar. They didn't want to break all these urns open, so they waited, and they felt that science was going to get to the point where they wouldn't have to break the urns. But early on, they had some broken urns, and they tested that. But pretty much it tells us all the same story. So what they see there are little shards of bone and milk teeth of children 6 months to 2 years of age. And ones that had already been broken, they had also tested. And there's just oodles of these urns. And it was hard for the archaeologist to discuss this because he was there. He was one of the ones that was, and this site had been worked on for many, many years before him, but they keep finding more things. And there's some of the things that they've gotten. You see the little teeth here, you see the little bones. And he suggests that they're looking for an oven because the ashes, the heat that would make the ashes that hot, couldn't have just been like an open area, but I don't know. So that's what they're looking for still. We don't know if the children were killed before the burning or if they were burned alive. Now, these are on top, and if you go to the Carthage site, you'll see these things here. They sit on top of the field of urns. And so as you look here, so you've got some asterisks, but mainly these, most of them are Baal, there's an asterisk. And so they believe that, like right here, this is what the opening of the shrine looked like, that they had a Baal image, and then the shrine had 2 pillars on either side. And so this is an industry for people. There are people that do nothing but make this stuff, so people can bring their children that they've born and sacrifice, and it just seems like a colossal waste. And on these, many have the gift to the Lord, Baal, and they will have the names of the parents that offer the sacrifice. There is no mention of the child's sex or age or name, but just the parents. And I mean, that's just awful to think about that mankind could stoop that low. These are called the votives. These were found in the votive pits. And these are heads of Baal and heads of Ashtoreth. And what they all have is some hole through the top that they hung from something. Here's a close-up of one. That's Baal. And then there's Ashtoreth. And remember what I told you earlier about olive trees, that the Greeks and the Persians, they know that they had olive trees around their places of worship, their temples. And if that be the case, if the Canaanites did that as well, I wonder if they also, when they made that offering, took these heads that they have there in that museum that have little holes for hooks, if they hung them from those trees. No one seems to know where the idea of Christmas ornaments came from, or the idea of having a tree inside your home for the holidays came from. But, you can see some, distant parallels, I think, in some of this stuff. And it just is kind of, in some ways creepy. Now, remember that Elijah challenged the Baals the priest of Baal, and he went to Mount Carmel. And if you've never done it, it's kind of neat to go on Google now and go and type in Mount Carmel in Israel, and you can go up and look at the different pictures and the sites and everything up on that mountain, and it'll save you a trip there. And at Jezebel's table, 400 priests of Ashtoreth ate, but 450. And so Elijah asked the question, how long are you going to vacillate between two opinions, two gods that are the God of Israel or this image? And we know what Elijah does. But the people answer not a word until they see the results of the challenge. When God answers Elijah's, and he brings fire down, and it destroys the offering, the altar, and all that water that they poured upon that. And then the priest of Baal are just over there bleeding after trying to appeal. And it's interesting what Elijah does. He says, maybe Baal's on vacation. Maybe he's asleep, you know. And, you know, our God can do these things. I like what Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said when they were about to be put into the fire. And they said to Nebuchadnezzar, our God is able to deliver us. But if he chooses not, if they left it up to God, you know, we're going to go in the fire. And our God can deliver us. But if he doesn't choose us, you still know that there is a God of Israel. And they would not worship his God. So, take courage. So, in 2 Kings chapter 3, there's this unusual event that happens there. And I used to have difficulty when I read it. I'm trying to understand exactly what was going on. So, you have the son of Ahab, and, you know, the son of Ahab that had all those priests of Baal. And then you have Jehoshaphat, king of Judah. And why Jehoshaphat aligned himself with Jehoram and Ahab is beyond my thinking, but they go up, and the king of Israel wants Jehoshaphat to go with him, and they go and they fight the king of Moab. And so we see in verse 26, the king of Moab saw the battle was too sore, and he took with him 700 men that drew swords to break through, but they couldn't break through. So he's looking for his, you know, final alternatives, what he can do. And so what does he do? He took his eldest son that should have reigned in his stead and offered him upon the wall. Now, why did he do that? And there was great indignation against Israel, King Jehoram, because they did that. That's the kind of worship they did. And what did they do? They departed from him and returned to their own land. So at least at this point in time, those of Judah, it seems, and the others that had contributed to help this king of Israel, when they saw this actually take place and then realized, this is what the Israelites are doing, it seems that they turned and departed from there. And it seems that the king of Israel was appeased by the sacrifice, but I'm not sure. But what do you think? You know, so Manasseh in 2 Kings 21, 12 years old when he begins to reign. He did evil, which was in the sight of the Lord. You know, sometimes you ask the question, how old should someone be baptized? You know, what's the age? And I think it's different for everyone, but there's a couple of these kings that are pretty young that when they come to the throne, and it will say they did evil in the sight of God. And some of them don't live to make it to be teenagers. And God recognized their sins. So, you know, that I kind of, give that some thought. He reared up altars for Baal and made a grove, as did Ahab. He worshipped the host of heaven, the constellations. You know, if you know someone in the church that's really into astrology, you need to show them some of these verses. I know it seems like fun, but I've known some people that have got caught up in this, and they look at their horoscopes, and they go by their horoscopes and not by the scriptures. And I think that's wrong. He built altars and graven images. He made his son pass through the fire. He brought much wickedness in the sight of the Lord. He shed innocent blood very much till he had filled Jerusalem from one end to the other. What does that tell you about children? One, they're innocent. It's innocent blood. Remember when David, the child died between he and Bathsheba, the first child? And after the child died, David got up and the soldiers asked, well, you fasted when the child was alive, and now you get up and you're going to eat. And he said, when the child was alive, God might have changed his mind or repented. And he said, now the child cannot return to me, but I can go to the child. And then look at the contrast when Absalom dies. And he's an adult. And he tried to usurp the throne. And he's killed for that action by David's servants. And he weeps. Absalom, my son. He doesn't say, I can go to Absalom. So it looks, we see the contrast there of children there. Manasseh seduced them more to do evil than all the nations of the Lord to destroy before the children of Israel. Because of Manasseh's sin, and it's told to Josiah that comes after, who repents, that God will still punish Judah for Manasseh's sins. Even though Josiah is a good king, but he won't do it in Josiah's day. Sin, the action of sin, seems to accumulate against the nation. When you look through the Old Testament, and you look at some of these, God waited 400 years for the Amorites' iniquity to be filled. Now think about this. Now, does this information, do you take it lightly or does it disgust you? Now think about it. So, Josiah, we just mentioned, and it said, notwithstanding, God turned not from the fierceness of his great wrath, and his anger was kindled against Judah because of the provocations of Manasseh that had provoked him. And God was going to punish him. And that was with Babylonian captivity and the destruction of Jerusalem. Now look at this country. So since 1973, and this data is, I think, up to 2014, 60 million abortions in the U.S. of A. That's the population of the North and South in the Civil War. And they were appalled at the number of people that died in the battles because it was a bloody war. Do you think God is hearing the cries of the innocents? Do you think the sins of America have provoked God? I was in Colorado and I did this lesson, and no, I said Colorado. I was in Oklahoma, and there was some people visiting that had come to the museum from Colorado, and I gave this lesson, and he came up after the service and he says, now, do you really think God's going to punish America for abortions? Are you trying to draw that parallel? And I said, do you see a parallel? I see a parallel. I mean, even Josiah repented, but God was still going to bring that upon Judah because of the sins of Manasseh. How much longer is God going to wait, I wonder? Worldwide, 1.5 trillion. And that's just the ones they know about. Now, what's the difference of killing a child in the womb versus killing one outside the womb? They say the child had feelings. You know, when our twins were born, one of our twins had a brain bleed, and so it was a problem for pregnancy to begin with. So Carmen, we knew might not make it. And when I went back to the ICU after she had been delivered, and I mean, this is like in the wee hours of the morning it's happening, and I'm just like, and I was hiding out, and the doctor found me, and she says, "Get in here, you know, you're gonna have to make some decisions." And you know, you're just kind of like, well, you know, is this really happening, you know? And so the babies are born, and then they said, "You need to go back to the ICU." And so I get back, and I'm going to the ICU, and Carmen is in this little incubator, and she's just, you know, there. And they said, just talk to her, hold her hands, and I didn't know what to say. And I don't remember what I said. I said something, and she reached out, grabbed my hand. She knew who I was. She knew who I was, and she would not let go. And she's holding on. She knew my voice. Do we know the Lord's voice? Fewer and fewer people are listening anymore. And this is going to be scary at some point in time. I believe. You can give me your opinions afterwards, but I wanted to share that with you today.